all you cool cats and kittens. This is your episode 227 of the At Percussion podcast. Today is Sunday, April 5th, and this is being released on Thursday, April 30th. My name is Ben Charles, and with me, as always, today I have Karli Vina.
Hi, everyone.
Ksenia Komjunovic.
Hey, Ben Tiger King.
And Casey Cangelosi.
I haven't seen this movie you guys are talking about, but it was fun listening to your rave about. What's it called again?
Tiger King.
And how did you all watch it at the same time?
It's like the biggest news on Netflix right now. It's
How
7
is
episodes long.
Netflix?
Just wipe like 5 hours out of your schedule to watch it. It's worth it all in one go. I stayed up to like 3 a.m. watching it. It was amazing. Yeah.
Okay, I can do it.
Yeah. So, there's a lot of important history in that show. But speaking of important history, Casey, what happened in music history today?
Yeah, sure. So we're releasing on April 30th, and I guess I'll go in reverse chronological order. So first ever female to win a Pulitzer Prize was in 1983, and her birthday is on April 30th. And it's Ellen Taft Zillich, violinist and composer. So her birthday is today. And also Claude Debussy's one and only completed opera called Pélias and Melisande premieres today. That was in 1902. And probably the biggest one that I dug into a little bit, and it probably pertains to us the most, is in 1985's birth of Italian composer and futurist painter, the creator of noise music, and where kind of the percussion ensemble lineage begins in most percussion literature classes and by most accounts, and that's Luigi Russolo. Are you guys familiar with Russolo?
Oh, yes.
Ben, I bet you are. Yeah, well,
Yeah.
What do you remember off the top of your head?
I remember he wrote like some sort of like manifesto, I think, on like what he thought the future of music was. And I think he came up with different instrument families. And one of his instrument families was like large, like motorized sounds, like helicopters. I mean, just like, like, like Beethoven was a pretty big step for music in his day. But this was, I mean, even by Harry Part standards, a pretty big departure from all of music so far.
So those things you're talking about are these, and they were called in tone R numeri. I'm probably saying that far, far, far from what it's supposed to be called, but this is his first sketch of it. I hope you guys can see my screen. This is his first little like blueprint draft of it, and yeah, these are those machines, and they do like siren type sounds, and you crank it, and it's. Yeah, his were plywood and cardboard, these cardboard horns. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can see this because I'm overlaying some photos right now. But very like, kind of sounds like Varese, that siren and everything. And they say that Russolo influenced Varese a lot. And it's because of Russolo that Varese had a lot of these ideas that went on to his electronic music, and then even on to ionization, what's considered, give or take, the first percussion ensemble, basically. And it's this whole idea that by embracing the notion that noise can be valuable and percussion is very noisy, all of a sudden percussion seems like okay to write for. But yeah, that manifesto you're talking about, I believe is The Art of Noise. And it is a little confusing because there's also a futurist manifesto, which Russolo didn't write, but they often quote from that manifesto just to explain like more of what Russolo does. There's another shot of these. There's 27 of these instruments, and he had individual names for each of them. His paintings are also pretty interesting. This is just a few of his paintings I just pulled off. This one's called Music. Sorry if you're not on YouTube, but you can imagine some paintings. Just like imagine a painting. You'll probably get. Does that work? just like the Mona Lisa, whatever. But yeah, this one's called Music, and this is in the futurist style. This one, what was this one called? Oh, it was called The Solidity of Fog. So it's sort of like this abstract lighthouse. It's kind of impressionist looking to me, but not quite. And this one's called Perfume.
Ooh.
I like that. Yeah, and this one they often show with him, but it's not from his futurist time. It's from his expressionist period, and you can sort of tell, like, yeah, that doesn't fit with the others. So
very cool. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Varese. Last week I assigned a listening assignment to my students since we're not here in person doing percussion ensemble, and I did Varese's ionization. And my students make fun of me because, oh, there's Robin. It's been a while since Robin's made a podcast appearance.
I had my mic off, and I thought, no, he's gonna say something cute. I'm gonna leave it on.
But yeah, so Varese, sorry, I was saying it. My students make fun of me because he wrote the first percussion ensemble work depending on what metric you consider the first percussion ensemble work. Because, for example, Shostakovich had written an intermezzo and an opera before that was for percussion alone, and I performed that. Amadeo Roldan wrote, I think, 6 ritmicas, numbers 4 and 5 are for percussion only. And then finally, after that, Varese wrote the first actual percussion ensemble work for percussion alone, which contains 2 sirens as well as piano. Yeah, it's interesting actually. Varese had to write a sequel to Ionization, which name I can't remember, but basically you couldn't perform that piece during wartime because it had sirens in it, and it was illegal to use sirens for anything other than signaling and attack. So yeah, fun fact about Varese.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
I'll have to listen back to this because I couldn't hear anything because I was staring at Robin.
You're looking at Robin? He is rolling his tractor on the microphone, so I'm trying to mute it.
Trying to make some solo noises. In addition to Robin Cangelosi, our other guest today is Matthew Nichols. Matt is the instructor of percussion at Florida Atlantic University and an active freelancer in South Florida, having performed with the Miami Symphony, South Florida Symphony, New Deco Ensemble, the Florida Grand Opera, and others. As a freelancer, he's performed with Ben Folds, Jacob Collier, and Steve Marley. And he is a member of the newly formed percussion quintet with their very own Ksenia. That group is called Neuma. So welcome to the podcast, Matt Nichols.
Hey, sorry, I left my toy truck outside. Sorry, I would have, if I knew I could have brought it in, I would have kept it. I made it a part of the podcast. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, of course. So Matt actually was my successor at FAU. So Matt, how's Boca Raton these days?
Still kicking. Well, minus the quarantine. It's great. It's great.
Sunnier than Stephenville, Texas, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Well, Matt, since you and I have this unique, we'll call it relationship. Matt's newly married, so Matt, don't tell your wife I called him that.
Yeah.
But Matt, since you're in a sort of unique position here, could you tell us about what it was like to inherit a percussion program from someone else? And did I do anything, hopefully that was helpful, but could I have done more to make it your life easier in the beginning?
Yeah, how bad was it?
How bad on a scale?
Well, what kind of train wreck?
Really
Colossal train wreck or what?
Yeah. No, it was interesting because I was coming from the University of Miami, and at that time I was still kind of, I guess, on the high of being in school. And so the turnaround to go from, okay, I'm working as hard as I can to win a job and to be successful on my own, to, okay, now I am working with students who are, having similar aspirations in different ways, was definitely a bit of a shock. The school is kind of located in a place where, some students either are transferring in from the local colleges, the 2-year programs, or they really can't go much farther outside of Palm Beach County. And so you get a really unique blend of students who want to, go start a studio versus the students who are like, I want to go study with somebody else and go get another degree or something like that. And I think you did a really good job of helping them understand what options there were. So I didn't necessarily feel like I had to walk in and tell everybody, like, no, this is what you have available. These are the kinds of things you should be thinking about. Like, they all knew, oh, well, when Dr. Charles was here, he was telling me about doing this or this, and I want to keep working on this. So I think transitioning from you to me there were some opportunities to just kind of keep the ball rolling with some of those students who were finishing up. And I think the other thing that was kind of interesting was the challenge of a program that wants to build but has limitations. So, we're dealing with a theater that is ancient. We're dealing with a building where they had to go in and tear out classrooms to build practice rooms, remember? And then they only gave us a few practice rooms that were safe for percussion to play in because the people downstairs couldn't hear themselves think in their offices because of the drum set right above them. And so,
Too bad. Deal with it.
Right? So
deal with it. You think I like listening to you talk about
Type?
Who
type.
doesn't want to hear percussion all day? I don't know.
So yeah, I mean, it was a pretty clear understanding. I mean, the things where I guess I came in and said, yeah, no, Ben was right. Ben said that we need this, or Ben was talking about, we need to build some of our facilities, some of the instruments. We need more instruments if we have more players, that kind of thing. So that, I mean, I don't have any criticism really about how that transferred over. And your check did clear, by the way.
Yeah. One thing that my predecessor at FAU had done for me that I tried to pass along to Matt was like, just give a summary of like what each student was working on, where they are, like what their strengths and weaknesses are. That I thought helped me so much getting started, instead of the first lessons being like, all right, well, you know how to hold 4 mallets or what?
Yeah.
Well, Matt, I guess I'll ask, not as like a criticism of myself, but was there anything that you walked in and I'll call it like made your own changed in some way? Maybe not immediately, but in due time. Sorry to put you on the spot like that.
Things that I would have that I changed that were, well, this is like, oh, well, this is what Dr. Charles did, or this is how Dr. Charles wanted it. I kind of reorganized where some of the instruments went. The transition between me and you was they gave me a broom closet on the first floor that they had to move all these history department filing cabinets out of, with grades in it, by the way, from like the 80s, paper grades. But they gave me that room as like an office, and I kept some of my instruments and stuff in what is the percussion studio. And they gave us, after a while it became an issue because I wanted the students to have, for instance, like a concert snare drum to practice on. And outside of taking the one from Wind Ensemble, they used mine. And something happened to it. And I said, okay, can someone just fess up? I'm not going to like charge you for damaging my property, but I just want to know like what happened so I can fix it. And no one fessed up. And so I ended up saying, I need my own room with my own space to not only teach, but to hold my instruments. So they were able to negotiate. There's, with those 4 rooms, if you can recall, there's 4 rooms that have percussion instruments. There's a larger studio where they took 3 practice rooms and made this L-shaped room. Then there's a small one, and then another small one, and then there's a medium-sized one for what they had, the jazz combo. And we figured out that we could move the jazz combo downstairs to another room, and I got that room as an office. And so just, I guess, trying to change either what the understanding was, because I think you were pretty easygoing with how you taught, or where you taught, or when you taught. And I kind of went in and said, no, I need a space that can lock and no one else can access.
All right, look, you seem like a nice kid, so I'm gonna give you a tip. How long have you been at FAU?
4 years.
4 years. You're not that new on the block. So if an office opens, just move your stuff in there. Just don't
say,
wait.
you leave the door open for just a minute? I'm gonna take care of something real quick.
The amount of dibs in academia like that are impressive.
It depends. I mean, obviously it depends on your department, but my first job, I mean, anyway, it was the wild, wild west. Just like, oh, this office is open. I'm putting my stuff in there. And and it worked. It always worked, and no one seemed to mind. So
there's an interesting problem right now with the office that I have, because even though they went in and did all this extra soundproofing and built it up so that it should be isolated from other rooms in the hallway as well as the different floors, I shared the same ventilation system as the choir room. So when there's 2 drum sets playing in my office for a lesson and the choir is rehearsing, they roll their eyes at me because they can hear me playing way too loud. And then when I'm teaching like a soft excerpt lesson and they're singing full choir, then I roll my eyes at them. And so we're going to keep working on that.
I thought you were going to say it smells like hairspray when you're teaching, because they're...
Thankfully not. Yeah. Not yet.
Just a quick funny anecdote of how well the transition between Matt and I went. At the time that I was teaching at FAU, I drove a blue Honda Fit, and Matt drove a blue Honda Fit. Matt is from Richmond, Virginia. I'm from Richmond, Virginia. We both went to Miami, and Matt actually, at least his first year, Matt actually moved into the apartment that I moved out of.
Wow.
We made sure there was like as minimal confusion, like, oh, blue Honda Fit in the parking lot. I guess our percussion guy's here.
Yes. I forgot about that. Yeah.
It's funny that I've known both of you for so many years, and I actually didn't realize all of those things.
Yep.
It was a very, very smooth transition. I'm really bummed. I moved out of that place. I shouldn't have. Such a great deal.
Hey, I was going to ask, and you've probably said a lot of it already, but something we often get asked from Facebook is, as a new professor, and you're not brand new professor, but what did you like? What came up in the job that you didn't expect, and what if you could, tell yourself 2 years prior to getting the job and still being in school, be like, hey, so get ready for this and this, because that's not in the handbook, so to speak.
I would say there's a little bit of, I guess you have to know your audience. You have to know your student base. So I went to Miami, where there was a culture of freak out until your lesson's over and then start freaking out for the next lesson. And coming into it, I was ready to just like do something really really intense and get everybody kind of, all right, well, you're here to study, you're here to make music, let's cram in as much as we can in 4 years. And I think more of it has been trying to get some of these students to realize, either, are you sure that you want to go to school for a music degree? And if so, like, when are you gonna, either take things seriously, or when are you going to really push yourself? And I've interestingly enough, each year I read those student evaluations with a nice glass of wine, trying to figure out what comments are either, okay, someone's just mad at me because they didn't like their grade, or what is actually worth keeping for the next year. And there's always a funny blowback between the amount of either, should I step in more often and say, no, I need you to keep a daily log and I'm going to grade you on it, and I need to see what you're doing every hour to make sure that you're utilizing your time as efficiently as possible? Or is it, hey, look, when you show up, whatever I think you did, however well you play for me, is the grade you get? There's some of some of the students are just like, let me work on my own pace, and some of them say, I wish you would have been more on top of my schedule and keeping me honest or keeping me focused. And I don't know if I've figured out the best way to find that balance, and I don't plan on like having it figured out just yet. But it's definitely kind of an interesting thing that I didn't know, or I didn't think about going into it, because I guess either being in the grind of um, learning is going to school and then trying to prepare your resume and doing all these things to become just a better musician, and then you go in to be the teacher, and sometimes that expectation gets a little wonky. It's like, what do you mean you don't want to sub with the New York Philharmonic tomorrow? Like, you should keep working harder and harder. But in reality, some of them are like, I just want to go work at my brother's studio when I graduate because he needs another audio engineer or something like that. Yeah, and I think also the personable stuff was something I didn't really think about. I mean, to some extent, being able to work with your colleagues, but then getting into it, I realized I think I was a little more focused on like just trying to get myself together and try to build these relationships with the students. And I probably missed out on a couple of opportunities to work with my colleagues as well and get to know them and build that kind of relationship, so that they don't just think, oh, well, Matt only comes here to teach and then he leaves to go do his own thing. So I think thinking about that when I started, I think I should have said, hey, cool your jets a little bit and get to know your colleagues a little more.
Yeah, that's a good answer.
So Matt, I was reading in your bio, it says that you taught secondary education in Virginia before you came to Florida. Were you a high school band director?
No, I was an instructor. I was an instructor with, I guess, a specialist, if that makes sense in the terminology.
So teaching just percussion, but in middle school or high school?
Working with marching bands, working with percussion classes, building concerts, building repertoire for concerts. There wasn't as much in Virginia, and in Florida, there's a lot of push towards music performance assessments and doing like solo and ensemble, or even just like the wind ensemble assessment. And in Virginia, it was marching band and wind ensemble intense, and there wasn't really any statewide assessment for soloists outside of trying to get into all state or all district or all county.
And yeah, I agree. I remember growing up in Virginia, I was like, why don't we like play solo at a thing? Like, it bothered me.
Right. So that just gave us the opportunity to either like put together a fun concert or put together because also WGI really wasn't around as much. It definitely got a lot more popular as I left Virginia, at least in the area where I lived. And so I spent a lot of my time, once we finished with marching band, it was going through and doing a techniques class or doing like their percussion class, and then also working towards getting that said class to put together some pieces for a percussion ensemble.
So how do you think that work in the schools has influenced your teaching now at the college level? Or maybe what did you learn most from those experiences?
So with all due respect to my students, it's actually not that big of a difference. I think personality wise, I'm kind of noticing a lot of a pull from either like high school etiquette or high school habits, which for me it was dealing with either what they dealt when I was in teaching the high school. It was what was their middle school background, how much training did they have, or how much drive how much kind of curiosity did they build while they were younger. And I just kind of see that moving up from high school into the university, where it's like, okay, well, sometimes it's more interesting to ask them, where did you go to high school? Because their high school was had such a positive relationship with their band and with their friends in band, that they are better students, or they are harder working students, or they're more driven to be successful because of the culture of their band versus necessarily the way that they play, if that makes sense. And also part of me wants to have a little more of an independent relationship with the students, to just say, you get this done, see you later. And, we'll come back together after you've worked on it for a week. And sometimes it makes more sense to be more involved with them, checking in on them. If I see them in the hallway, I'm asking them, why aren't you practicing? And if I see them, in the practice room, I say, why aren't you practicing? That kind of stuff. Which happens strangely more than I realize. I walk in and they're all just like either on their computers or someone's got a Nintendo Switch and they're, trying to figure out who's going to win the next tournament. And I'm like, that marimba is lonely, man. Really talk to it.
It's hard to build a culture.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool when it feels like it sort of takes over and runs itself. And yeah, you can talk about a Nintendo Switch game and be happy that you're doing so, It's
Right.
It's not everywhere. Hey, what we're talking about university, have you guys ever heard of universitytitlegenerator.com?
Yes.
No.
It's amazing.
What?
No.
It's amazing. Well, I don't know why we've never done this on the podcast. I mean, we talk about higher ed all the time, but we should probably just take a reading from University Title Generator. So this one's called Vice Liaison to External Climate to the Subcommittee for Employee Services. Salary $76,000.
Nice.
And one more. Vice Chancellor of the Committee on Learning Technology, $293,000 a year.
Solid.
Associate Vice Coordinator of the Subcommittee for Strategic Investor Affairs. That's really good. Only $58,000 a year, though. That doesn't.
That's way more.
Yeah, that would be way more than that.
But the refresh button saying, click here if this position is not prestigious enough for you.
That's right. We should probably do a reading from that every episode.
Probably, yeah.
That's all I have then.
Changing gears a bit, one thing that Karli, Matt, and I, and maybe Ksenia, maybe to a lesser extent, all have in common is South Florida has a really good freelance scene. And when I was teaching at FAU, I freelanced, and Matt definitely freelances quite a bit. And Matt, I'm sorry to just completely channel the discussion into my interests, but you played with Jacob Collier. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I like them apples.
Which, as a side note, if anyone doesn't know who Jacob Collier is, stop listening to the podcast now. Go learn about music, listen to Jacob Collier, and then come back. We'll still be here. Sorry, Matt, go ahead.
Okay, so Ben, I don't know who is more obsessed, you or me. But when I saw, I think when Jacob came to Texas and you drove to go see him and took a picture with him, I was like, dang it, man, Ben's got a picture with Jacob. And then when New Deco said, yeah, we're bringing in this guy, Jacob Collier, I literally peed myself, and then dealt with my consequences.
You noticed the waist up for a reason.
Yeah. So it was, man, he, I think the story was that he was at Ground Up, and the two co-founders of New Deco, Giacomo and Sam, were, they saw him and they walked right backstage and just said, Jacob, you need to come play with us. And he was like, yeah, sure, man, no problem. And then they worked out the details and he came and we did 4 of his Metropole Orchestra arrangements. So it was pretty easy to kind of put together. But he came in, killed it, and then left. His performance was so well put together. And I think at the time he was recording some of the beginnings of these Jesse albums. And so I remember we went after the performance, my brother and I went backstage and got an autograph and a picture. And while he was signing something, I said, so what's next for you right now? You're going to leave Miami and do what? And he's like, oh, I'm going to go record with the Metropole Orchestra. I'm working on this 4-album thing that I'm doing. And I was just like, oh, okay, cool, whatever. And then when it launched, I realized that was the insanity that he's been putting together. So, man, he's, yeah. He honestly, and I guess to kind of talk about it even more, Jacob, is the kind of inspiration that you don't necessarily have to know what he's doing, but the fact that he's doing it is just uncomfortably impressive. He's talking about all these, building in these swing feels that are based off of African, rhythms in mixed meter, and you don't have to know that to like feel how good that beat is when he plays it, and when he builds. You see the Jejun Lee transcription that's like, oh, he's going into microtonal tuning, and you sit there and go, I mean, I didn't hear it, but I definitely heard something, or I didn't realize what it was, but I definitely heard it. And sometimes that's kind of a fun when he's been uploading like his singles for all these things, to just like if the student walks by, even if I don't know them, I'm like, stop, come here, listen. Okay, now have a great day. Like I don't even have to talk to them about it. I'm just like, people just need to hear it. People need to get hip to him as much as possible. But
Yeah, and I agree with so much of what you said about like he can take these just extremely advanced concepts
right.
and like somehow put them in music that makes sense. And it reminds me of Alejandro Viñao kind of has this thing about like, like compositional technique is great, but if it doesn't sound like anything, not really worth it. And so and Jacob's stuff is so like that. And like his newest tune he just released, it's called In My Bones. There were at least 2 people that miraculously like within 2 days had transcribed it. But you don't even realize it listening to it, but the entire thing is, I think, in G half flat. It's just kind of like, what? But and then the other like Jacob Collierism, in addition to the microtone stuff, is like I've never heard anyone talk about this other than him, but varying degrees of swing. And so his like, swing to us is usually triplet based, like 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1, and his favorite swing is 57% swung as opposed to 66% swung. So it's a relationship of 4 to 3 at like long note versus short note instead of like 2 to 1. And I mean, just go on YouTube and listen to him do it. It's better than hearing me sit here and fumble around talking about it. But yeah, I've been trying to do that, and like he can do it and make it sound so natural. And when I do it, I'm like, well, I don't know, maybe that was 57%. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. It's funny because I kind of hear, I hear a lot of older musicians, and if we were talking about that swing thing, talk about jazz musicians being like, no, it's this kind of swing. It's this kind of swing where they'll talk like, this is a Thad Jones swing, or no, this is like a really light, easy swing. They'll kind of categorize it based on the artist. And then Jacob is like, no, I sat down and I figured out every single percentage, and I figured out which ones I like and which ones I don't like, and in the fact that he can recall them, and even like in his conversations where he'll sing back a thing that he's thinking, or a chord that he's thinking, and it's just like just perfectly there.
And well, I mean the swing thing, usually I feel like in jazz usually it's like 2 to 1 or a harder swing, like ding da ding da ding. It's like a 16th note based swing, whereas with his it's actually a looser, like less harsh
right
version of it.
Yeah.
So
I was super intelligent.
I stole the June Lee transcription for Jacob's version of PYT, and I learned the solo, but I can't get the shuffled 16th notes to sound right.
Matt, well, we're talking about freelancing. What is your best freelance survival tip?
Man, be ready for anything, and like say yes until you have to say no, kind of thing. Like I think I heard someone when I was in my undergrad who came from New York who talked and said you need to if you want to get into Broadway, you have to be at the backstage door, so when those musicians leave, you make contact with them, you let them know you're in the area, and then you give them your contact information, and you wait. And you wait, and you wait, and you wait. And if they call you, you are ready to go, and you blow them out of the water, and then you're in. Like you've got, this is how it works. And that terrified me. And it was strange because there was a couple of opportunities that I had to say no to, and then I just stopped hearing from those people, and I got heartbroken immediately because I was sitting there like, all right, well, I'm never going to freelance again. Like the guy who does so much freelancing in the area, he I had to say no because I was visiting my family out of town, and I didn't want to like turn that opportunity down. But now I'd never hear from that person again, and so then it was like, okay, well, all of a sudden someone else, oh hey, we got your name from a recommendation of a recommendation. Can you do this silly little thing? And I immediately jumped on it until I finally got to the point where I could say, sorry, can I pass this on to somebody else? So that's such a terrifying thing, though. I mean, every time someone says that they want to freelance, I have to say to them, and I say either like, okay, and what else are you gonna do, or and who's gonna pay your rent for the first few years? Because
Yeah, like you want to freelance?
yeah, right.
Want
That's
to?
that's plan A.
Yeah. So yeah, and it, it's, or if one of my students said, oh, I want to play with New Deco. What do I do to make a living playing with New Deco? It's like, well, you're not gonna make a living playing with them, but you work hard, and then when the time comes, you say yes, and you better be ready to play.
Well, freelancing's a bizarre term because it's a little misleading. Like people who are successful freelancers, they do it enough and they build relationships to where they have dependable gigs. So it's not like, I know I'm kind of, clarifying with my joke, you want to freelance. Like, well, like, no, that's a really good ambitious, like a good ambition once you get to a really successful place where, yep, you can always count on Boston Baroque at this time of the year. You can always count on Boston Modern Orchestra at this time of the year. You can always count on this community group at that time of the year. Like that's, with probably some margin of predictability, like a worldwide pandemic or something, hitting.
Give or
But
take.
like, like that. Yeah, like freelancing does turn into regular work, which I think people forget. Ben, I'm sorry, you were gonna say something.
Even like a lot of the most successful freelancers, like there's a guy in South Florida named Neil Shukla that does a ton of freelance work, still teaches privately. And I mean, like the number one guy in Dallas, his name is Drew Lang, freelances all over the place, still teaches at one or two universities, I think. Yeah, I mean, I've had students say like, oh, I just want to move to Nashville and gig. It's like, well, one, good luck. Two, still gonna have to teach or flip burgers or something. Yeah.
Well, and it might take like 10 years to get to that point.
Yeah,
like
or at the very least, it'll take a while.
Yeah, I mean, if you're half decent, you can find the gigs that will keep calling you back.
Yeah.
But like, can you be persistent enough and survive for that first 10 years? To like really build it in a city.
And we also get some. Go ahead, Karli. Sorry.
I think so much of it depends on a certain degree of luck too. Like Matt said, like just being available on the day that they call you, and then blowing it out of the water and having a great day. You just kind of what everybody says, being in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've all had that moment where someone walks up to you and says, "You're playing the hell out of that xylophone part." It's like, yes, okay, getting called back. And then I'll keep this brief because I'm trying to keep it about Matt, not me, but we all have our horror stories. There was one where Karli and I had a gig, and I was playing timpani, and Karli brought the timpani, and Karli was playing percussion, and I brought the percussion, and poor Karli, I forgot the gong. We had to freak out. Luckily, Svet was kind and loaned us a gong. We had just enough time on our dinner break to go get it, and the rehearsal was so disorganized it actually didn't matter anyway. We wouldn't have played it.
And then there was the symbol. It doesn't matter.
There's the gig I've told the story before for sure, but I forgot my pants one time. Don't do that. But well, Matt, to change gears a little bit, there's this new percussion quintet that you and Ksenia and some of our other Frost School of Music friends have formed called Neuma. Could you tell us about that group and how mean Ksenia has been in rehearsals and anything else?
Yeah. So Neuma is a bit of a reunion for us, and the Neuma idea was that we were going to get together and play. Ksenia was out, and she came back into the States, got this job, and said, let's do this again. let's get together and play. And all of us found our availability to get together, and we made our inaugural concert in Texas with Dr. K. And the I mean, we're right now, what we've done is kind of settled on the repertoire that fits the players, the stuff that we enjoyed playing in the past, stuff that we probably want a second chance at, or we maybe want to play a little bit better, because all of us have grown. I mean, we learned so much while we were in Miami. We learned so much studying the repertoire with Svet and getting a lot of really critical feedback. And then we've all kind of gone and done other things. And it's been kind of fun to come back together and see what is our collaboration like. I mean, for me, I've been in Boca with my only freelancing. The closest percussion ensemble gig I had was with the Palm Beach Symphony's outreach program, where I played a hammer on a nail for a kids concert. And so for me to like get back into chamber music of a substantial quality was definitely a huge turn on for me. So for us to have that opportunity for that first performance was great, and now it's just going to be moving forward and playing as much as we can for whatever we want and whenever we want. So
We had all these plans, and now they're all...
Yeah, we were going to get together in Miami and do some rehearsals and maybe play for a forum, and then we went. Then that got canceled because that was the beginning of the outbreak, and travel was getting a little scared. And then we were going to go. We were come back and play with Dimitri for his artist diploma recital, and that's kind of postponed. And then we were going to play at Carnegie Hall with Dimitri, one of the members who has this performance with the Concert Artists Guild, for his debut at Carnegie, and that got rescheduled to later, which has now been canceled. So it's the next time we get together, it'll be great. Whenever that happens.
Next time there's not a pandemic. Well,
we were so psyched. We were like, oh my God, we have our first performance, and then 3 months later, we're going to perform at 2 or 3 more universities and at Carnegie. This is such a great launching. And then all of a sudden it just went like,
Yep.
Well, I think Svet had coordinated for like the whole Frost Percussion Studio to be able to go, right?
He encouraged them, but he himself, which is very sweet of him, got his tickets to come and support, and then the world had to end before.
Until they canceled the later date, it was like a $50 round trip for that kind of thing to New York and back. So it was kind of a steal.
Totally possible. Yeah.
It would have been great, but nah.
Some other time.
Yeah, next time.
Well, in pandemic-related news, I think Karli has something to share with us today.
Yeah, so we're about 3 weeks into this social distancing and working from home at the time of recording. And I think the reality that we may have a long way to go before we're back to teaching and performing in person is starting to sink in for all of us. So as we're all adjusting to this new reality of this moment, I think one of the struggles that many students and probably also teachers alike may be facing is time management and productivity in the face of this crisis. Some people might be feeling an urge to be very productive. Some people might be feeling an urge to relax and slow down the pace of their lives. And other people might be dealing more directly or less directly with the stress and challenges of this pandemic. So I was looking for some articles related to this, and I came across a few good ones on Psychology Today that I thought were relatable and helpful, and I thought I'd share them all with you. The first is called Put on Pants and More to Cope with Physical Distancing. And I saw the title and was like, okay, I got to read that. It's by Dr. Reagan A.R. Gurung, and it lists some coping strategies, the first of which, of course, is to put on your pants. And he's saying no solid studies are really cited, but he says those wearing white lab coats have shown to do better on math tasks. And on the other hand, comfortable clothes, like whatever we're wearing around the house most of the time, might make you feel more relaxed and less motivated to be productive. So if you have a lot of work to do, things you have to get done, it might help you out to dress as you normally would as you're doing that work out and about, even if you're in your living room or on your couch. So the second strategy that he lists in the article is to step out of the data flow, which in this time I think really means turning off the news and just stop scrolling through your social media, which can be, of course, very good for productivity, but also really good for all of our mental health because there's so much going on. And yes, like we all want to be informed and we want to know what's happening and stay up to date, but it can get to be a little bit too much. So maybe turn off the news and go to work, do the work you need to do, or read a book, or get some exercise, or spend time with your family. I think that's healthy for all of us. The third strategy is to look beyond the obvious in like personal interactions. And I think we all need to treat everybody with extra empathy during this time because we're all reacting to the stress differently. Some people are really consciously dealing with stress and anxiety, and for other people it can be more underlying. But I think extra empathy for everybody is really valuable. The next one is a really important one, especially for musicians. It has to do with creating a schedule and specifically scheduling an end time to the work that you're doing. And this is probably one most of us need reminders for during the best of times, because as musicians, we tend to enjoy having our work take over our lives a lot of the time. But I think it's really important, especially as we're all here dealing with so much and at the same time still working, just schedule an end time for your work and go and do something else. I think that's important. And the last strategy is don't sweat the small stuff, which for me, I take to go hand in hand with choose to be grateful, look for things to be grateful for. Because in the grand scheme of what's going on in the world right now, it's, I think, really helpful to focus on what we have to be thankful for and just not to stress and spend too much energy focusing on relatively smaller things. So I also found one other article. It was also on Psychology Today. It's called A Silver Lining of Social Distancing by Dr. Emily Balcetis. I was drawn to it because I've found myself personally looking for silver linings in this challenging time and encouraging students in their lessons to find their own silver linings or positive things that are happening. So the silver lining that is addressed in this article is the gift of flexibility to be able to assess strategies that help us to be more or maybe less productive in our work. And what the author is discussing, she's talking about an informal study of her students that compared results when students identified a goal and made a plan to accomplish their goals either every day, they're setting goals day by day, or scheduling their work and planning their work for a whole week in advance. And the result of this informal study was that the students that planned their work a week in advance ended up spending more time working towards their goals throughout the week than those that planned day by day. So the moral of the story is if we plan our weeks in advance, and specifically for us and our students, probably plan our practicing in advance and our goal for the whole week, we'll be more likely to practice more and accomplish more, get more schoolwork done or whatever it is we need to do than if, you wake up and think, what am I going to do today? And what am I going to practice today? So I thought that was a good one because I see some of my students, I can tell are, going at it and practicing. They're like, what else am I going to do? I'm here. I got an instrument. And then others just kind of struggling a little bit. And, I think this is good advice, especially if you're on the side of having a lot to do and not knowing really the best way to tackle it.
I just had I think one time very long ago on the podcast, I mentioned one thing I consider is the term enabler. And Rob Knopper talked about this in a blog entry I read a long time ago. But basically, usually, to put it bluntly, when we think of enablers, we're talking about people with drug problems and addictions and what enables those habits. But I think enablers can be a positive thing too. And so, for example, if your only access to some sort of practice facility was 2 hours away and you had to ride a bicycle to get there, you probably wouldn't practice a whole lot. Whereas if you can walk out to your living room and there's an instrument there, it's very easy to practice. And I think that at the same rate, having the instrument in your living room can be a bad thing because practice can become sort of too casual, but we'll set that aside for a second. For me personally, I like practicing my snare drum technique on a practice pad, sitting in front of the TV watching. So in my living room here, I won't show on the podcast, but I have my practice pad set up in front of a drum throne directly in front of the TV. And I've been absolutely killing it on Netflix. And it's funny, I kind of like gauge how much I've practiced by how many TV shows I've watched. So like Tiger King came out like a week ago. I watched all of Tiger King in like a day or two. I think I watched a couple episodes one day, then like the other 5 episodes the next day. But I was like, okay, well, I just practiced snare drum for like 5 hours without even like thinking about it consciously. So yeah, I think at this point in time, especially when all of our habits and facilities and everything are so different, it's helpful to take a second and figure out what you need to do in order to enable yourself to practice easily and remove those limitations. Ksenia, I think you had something.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think in times of such great turbulence, there are people who can sort of stay awake and stop going on autopilot and feel like they're in control of everything and can take over their emotional response and think about gratitude and what can I do to positively impact my situation or to twist it in that way. And others might feel helpless, and that's totally fine. If you currently feel helpless, it does not mean that in hindsight, in 5 years, you won't look back and realize that you've somehow grown and learned from the situation. It just might mean that this situation will marinate a little bit longer in you and you will learn something from it later. And of course, doesn't mean that you shouldn't try to make the best of it in the moment, obviously live in the moment, but also as a lot of people have sort of, I think we've gone through a wave of like everyone being like, oh my God, I'm so super productive. And then people posting like, oh my God, screw all those people who are talking about productivity. You don't have to be productive, and I think the truth is in the middle. Just decide what's good for you. And also don't think that the result you're going to see now, you're probably going to realize it way later. But Casey, you were going to say something.
Well, I was actually going to say something about, and I think I posted this on our schedule to talk about later, but the people saying like, no, don't use this time to make sure you're like hyper productive, because that is like all you see on social media is like, hey, well, here's how I'm using my time, and here's how I can practice marimba when I'm only in my bathtub, and like it's just like constant like, and here if you don't like Zoom, then try these. Like there's just like 80,000 things. And I do agree, like, I think Karli, I think, said there's kind of two kinds of people: the people who are going to like use this as a time to really ramp up or use this as a time to relax. And one of my goals is to relax. So I'm trying to use it to relax. But I think we have to be very careful about who we tell the message of like, hey, don't work too hard in this time. It's a good time to like get in touch with like that part of you that doesn't know how to relax. Yeah, if you can't practice 30 minutes a day, we're not talking to you. I think it's whenever this stuff gets overhyped, the relaxing hype, you get those people that are like, oh man, I just don't want to push myself too hard. I've seen all these warnings about getting pushed too hard. Like, no, they're talking to the people who like obsessively practice for 8 hours a day. And it's one of the banes of quick headline clickbait information is you don't get all the nuanced details. If you had to actually read a study that was giving you the advice, you would find out in the abstract, we're only talking to like practice obsessed people. We're not talking to you guys looking for an excuse not to practice for an hour a day. Sorry, I know I've said that type of thing on the podcast before with other issues, but it rises again with this. It also made me think of, I love the whole like, there's a study, put people in lab coats and all of a sudden they do better at mathematic problems. Like they're suddenly thinking more mathematically. And I think the other one was, Karli mentioned they wear looser clothes and they're more relaxed. And there was another one was like people wearing Crocs are more creative. Like they answer creative questions better. And it makes so much sense.
Wait, Crocs?
I thought it was Crocs.
Crocs make no sense.
I think it said like artist smocks.
Oh. Wait, Crocs
That
are
makes
those like aren't Crocs those like sandal shoes with the holes in them that are really
Yeah.
those like
Yeah,
your way relaxed.
aesthetically offensive? No.
Oh yeah, no, they look ridiculous. But they're like way casual, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
it's not important. Y'all are probably right, but like, but that makes so much sense. And I remember Caleb reported a few years ago on some study, or I think he and I no, that's it. He reported on some study where like if there's blue lighting in your workspace, your work is more tuned to like this type of thing or this type of work, and I forget what's what, but you can go back and find it. And if it's red in the room, it's attuned to this. And if people are sitting in an oval shaped table, they're more inclined to talk about this and be more collaborative, as opposed to an L-shaped table that's angular and rigid. They're more inclined to be combative and contentious with one another. So I don't know, it really made me start thinking about, a few weeks ago we were talking about Yujie Wong and her concert attire, and we got into a little conversation about like, well, why do we even dress up? Blah 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 blah. It's like, well, maybe that has something to do with it. If you go out there feeling like you really look like a performer and feel like you look really good, maybe just like you do math well in a lab coat, you would do performance well in a performance gown or whatever. That's it. I'm done. Casey out.
Good rant. Matt, I was gonna ask you, and sorry, I haven't asked you a lot of questions, but I have two short ones. One is, if you could wake up tomorrow with a new skill, a new musical skill, what would it be?
New musical skill?
Mm-hmm.
Do a slap on a djembe. That's mine.
Yeah, right?
Consistent slap.
Still can't freaking do that. My left hand. I have more.
I think one of the things that bothers me is I've had a lot of opportunities to play with this jazz trio, Matthew Joy, who is the guitar teacher at FAU, and we play with Chris Patsis, who is a bassist, a freelancer in the area. And for them, they'll be playing something and just spit out jazz harmony things. Oh, are you playing this over this? Or what was that you played? Oh, it sounded like this kind of thing. Like recognizing, and I don't know if it would necessarily be like transcription or just simply being able to recognize more musical ideas in like live moments instead of having to, someone having to say, oh, this piece is in this sharp whatever, this this mode, or it's in this thing, like to be able to recognize and to be able to think through kind of what I'm hearing on a oh, he's just moving in this motion with these parameters based on like what I'm hearing harmonically. I think that, and that also came up when, and I hate to bring it back to Jacob Collier, but listening to listening to music with my brother, we spent a lot of time just kind of saying, like, now we're apart from each other, and but when we were living in the same city, we would sit down and like listen to a 30-second clip of something and try to figure out what is it that's happening right here. And even if it was a full ensemble, if it was a guy playing piano, or if it was like a choir arrangement that had all these really complex harmonies, being able to pick all that stuff out, not from the perfect pitch side, but from the relative of just being able to hear what relationships I can, as opposed to, wow, that sounds really juicy. And then I think that's a skill that I would love to have tomorrow.
Okay, we'll see if it can be arranged.
Exactly what you're talking about. Like for me, like I figured out like my favorite like harmonic motion is a 5 going to a flat 6. And if you know the Eddie Money song, Hold On to Me, like the entire song is just this gimmick of like the 5 going to the flat 6, back to the 5, back to the flat 6. And it's just like whenever I hear a song that just like tugs on your heartstrings, that's exactly what it is. The whole, like all the time. I finally like learned what that was because of that song.
Good job.
Well,
Good job.
I just had maybe a little follow-up question to this, and maybe the answer is just no from everyone. But and I've floated some ideas around in my own head. But does anyone have a social distancing project that they're working on? Maybe you're like recording a multi-track something or other on your own. Or the reason I'm asking this is my sister-in-law's aunt is a 4th grade teacher, and she said, I think we just need to accept that at the end of this, everyone's going to be 2 months dumber. is maybe kind of true, but I tried to approach it with my students like, okay, we can't do the regular stuff we would do in lessons in percussion ensemble. Like, what can we do? What unique skills can we work on? A lot of people are doing recording things. I didn't know if anyone here has any sort of special, unique project that they want to share. And like I said, maybe everyone just says no, and that's fine too.
I've got a couple of things, and some of them are related to my religious affiliation, which I'm a worship leader at a local church, and we have gone away from the worship service is as quarantined as possible, where the pastor is preaching and all of us are moving. We Sunday mornings are via YouTube, and we haven't really had as much of a worship team element because, again, that would require more than the limited amount of people in the same room gathered. And so we saw a bunch of places that are doing this, what they call selfie worship. And the idea is that everybody's like gets a click track or a play along track to listen to, and they sing it and do a selfie video of them singing it, and then somebody's putting them all together. And so we're doing something like that for our Easter service to kind of bring out the joy of that, what's happening with that kind of holiday. But at the same time, that is kind of encouraging a lot of new efforts. Not only, I guess, for me, it's pretty musical. For some of my worship team members, it's just trying to get them all into the thrill of kind of coming back together again or singing again. And then there's also been an interesting push with teaching secondary in the area where some of these band directors don't have. We are the percussion teachers, and they really lean on us for kind of helping their percussion classes get through. And they've come to us saying, what can you help us with? And so I put together like a little video series of different rudiment challenges and these different tiers, and demonstrating how to do that, as well as like different mallet warm-ups, different permutations. So building, strangely enough, as much as I'd like to think I'm tech savvy, kind of going through and figuring out how to build all these different videos, edit them in certain ways, add little examples, then how do I build them on YouTube so that it is something, can be put together, build a packet that can be, nicely packaged and sent to the next crew. But yeah, that's the kind of stuff that I'm doing.
I just have in place for chamber music. The good thing that I think I did with the group, and that I do now more and more frequently because we have very limited space and instruments, is that I try to program music that doesn't require any particular kind of space or instrument. So they're playing Mr. Cangeloosi's Plato's Cave, for example, and they're playing Head Talk and a bunch of pieces. Yeah, good programming. So what I've done is I've just taken them, put them on a single assignment only, and within each group they have to create a click track, they have to record and video themselves performing their part, and then they have to sort of, in a joint way, do a little video. It can be as simple as possible as just putting things and aligning it to the click track, or if they wish to be more creative than that, they can. But it is just a way to, keep chamber music going. And I think it's a very valuable skill to be able to create a click track for yourself and to play something from beginning to end. So that's it. Karli?
Yeah, mine's pretty simple, but this time of year, like height of freelance season, I can say that I do not get to play marimba normally as often as I do right now. So I'm like, love it. And when I'm practicing during the school year, I'm like, I've got a break at FIU today, so I'm playing on their marimba, and I'm practicing in different schools. So I'm pretty thrilled just to be able to play my marimba every day and kind of reconnect with it, and that's been super cool. I'm also looking, like Matt was saying, getting a lot of content online because, we're all teaching lessons online. So if there's more materials, like I'm kind of slowly starting to put some things on my website that I can just say, like, here, go and download this. Here's the link and check out this video. So I think that's one direction, we're all going in, like it or not. Everything's online.
I'm teaching.
Yeah, I just wanted
music.
to give a shout out to there's a guy named Matt Moore who teaches in the DFW area, And he wrote right at the beginning of this. In fact, he wrote a marimba. I guess it's a 4 parts, so quartet, but blown out into multiple people playing each part. We'll call it a marimba choir, called Together. That he asked people to record a part to, and I recorded one of the parts. And the final project has not been released yet, but whoever's editing it has all the parts. And Svet posted something on Facebook about how we can sharpen our recording skills right now. And I will definitely agree with that, because this very simple rolled marimba chorale, I think I spent 3 hours before I was happy with the take that I got. It made me appreciate so much the virtuoso that Emil Richards was, to be able to lay it down on the first take. Because even the most simple thing, you listen back and you're like, no, that's not how I want it to sound on the recording. So yeah. Well, cool. Thank you so much to Matt Nichols for joining us today.
Thank you, Matsky.
Yeah, thanks
so
much
for the whole regular crew, and we will see you next time for episode 228. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.